Today we will learn about the basics of JSON Web Token. JSON Web Token or JWT is an industry standard used to create authorization tokens for web applications. A JWT is cryptographically signed and not encrypted. The server creates a token that confirms the user identity, and sends it to the client. The client sends the token back to the server for all subsequent requests, and the server knows the request comes from an exact identity. After the user is authenticated, the server performs the API requests to an API. API is the acronym for Application Programming Interface, which is a software intermediary that allows two applications to talk to each other. When you use an app like Facebook to send an instant message, you are using an API. JSON Web Tokens consist of three parts separated by dots, which are header, payload, and signature. A JWT looks like the following. Let's break down the different parts. The header has two parts, the type of the token, which is JWT, and the hashing algorithm, such as HMAC SHA-256. The second part of the token is the payload, which contains the claims. Claims are statements about the user and additional metadata. There are three types of claims: reserved, public, and private claims. Reserved claims are ISS issuer, subject, AUD audience, IAT issued at, and EXP expiration time. The signature part must be signed with the encoded header, the encoded payload, a secret, and the algorithm specified in the header. The signature is used to verify that the sender of the JWT is who it says it is and to ensure that the message was not changed along the way. Putting it all together, the output is three base 64 strings separated by dots that can be passed in HTML and HTTPS environments. Base 64 is an encoding and decoding method used to convert binary data to an American Standard for Information Interchange (ASCII) text format, and vice versa. Use pagestart.spring.io to create our application skeleton and select security and web dependencies. Add JWT Java dependencies in the pom.xml file. Security configuration. Set secure endpoint. Add our two filters into the security context. Disable session management. Authentication Manager will use the in-memory authentication. In production, use a user details service. Use password be crypt encoder. Set up CORS configuration. Cross-origin resource sharing or CORS is a mechanism that allows restricted resources on a web page to be requested from another domain outside the domain from which the first resource was served. Define reusable constants and defaults for generation and validation of JWTs. In production, do not hardcode JWT signing key into your application code, instead use an environment variable or properties file. Controller. In this example, applications will return a message or HTTP 403 error message if user is not authorized. Plain old Java object for login data. This filter is used for user authentication. The filter checks for username and password parameters from URL and calls the Authentication Manager to verify them. This parse received JSON login data. If username and password are correct, then the filter creates a JWT token and returns it in HTTP authorization header. This filter handles all HTTP requests. This filter checks if there is an authorization header with the correct token. Filter checks if the token is not expired or if the signature key is correct. If the token is valid, then the filter will add authentication data into the security context. Run the JWT security application. Here is an example of how a JWT is obtained and used to access an API. JSON Web Token should be used for API authentication, and server-to-server authorization. For example, you sign up for a service and download a JWT from the API service. The web token issued to you will use from now on to authenticate all your requests to the server. Another example is sending the JWT when you manage the API and clients connected to your server, and users could send subsequent requests by just passing the token. Do not use JWTs for sessions because it is prone to data exposure. Thank you for watching. Visit the JWT.io to learn how to implement JWT libraries for token signing and verification.